Hello, welcome to the Scientific Writing Sessions podcast. I'm Sophie, a scientific writing mentor at Lancaster University's Learning Development team. In this podcast, I will talk to fellow mentors, students, and academics about common writing problems and how to overcome them. We will also cover writing tips and tricks, good writing practices, and common writing fears. Our podcast aims to show how writing is a creative and lifelong and personal process for everyone. And so today I'm very pleased to say that we have Nick, a fellow scientific writing mentor, on our podcast to talk about his writing experiences and journey. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you very much. It's really nice to be invited.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So first question that we ask everyone is, what's your favourite writing setup to get you in the zone, would you say?
I would say that my favourite writing setup is to be at a desk computer and to have just a fan blowing in the background and to ideally be alone. I find it difficult to focus on writing if there's just chaos around me.
Yeah, okay. So you can't really write in a cafe or...
I've found that especially when it's in a busy environment like a cafe, not only is it just hard to filter out the background noise, but the constant anxiety of is my laptop going to run out of charge? All of that stuff just tends to just make me overload and go somewhere else.
So you find that you're worried many more things will go wrong if you're kind of out of the solitude, let's say, of your environment.
Yeah, there's the old words of wisdom that I've heard is that the moment your work leaves your desk, gravity gets to it, which is that everything that can go wrong probably will.
Okay.
So it's probably better to limit the things that can.
Yeah, well, fair enough. And do you have a preferred drink for your best writing, and why?
I would say that I tend to prefer cold drinks, when I'm writing, simply because when you get into the zone, it's very easy to just forget that the cup of tea exists. And if you immediately down 2 cups of tea very early on, that means you're going to be rushing to the bathroom in short order. So I find that having a cold drink on the side, is something I can quite easily come back to. And it's something that doesn't have a time association with it.
Do you find then that you get so much in the zone that you, I suppose, lose sense of your environment? Because you say that's why you prefer a cold drink. Is that something that...
Yes. I can get deep enough into the zone that occasionally I can lose sense of a few objects that are around me. I have got to a point where I am so laser focused, even in the office here, where I've just not noticed people walking past me, or haven't noticed that someone else has gone home until I turn around to see where they are and just notice that the office is empty again.
And does the zone come to you easily, or is it something that you kind of have to grab when you feel it happening?
I know how to get into that state and how to get deeper into writing, the flow state as it's constantly referred to. But it is also something that I can be brought out of if it gets too noisy, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah.
I like to describe it as kind of stepping into the water. But then as soon as you see enough disturbances on the surface, you try and swim back up to see what's happening instinctively.
Okay.
But that's just how I work.
Yeah. And do you get into the zone or the flow state every day, or is it quite rare?
Because I've had a lot of experience both as a scientist and as an artist, a creator, both as a musician and as a visual artist, I've found a lot of different ways to get into the creative state, or into the flow state. And so I would say that I know to change up my method for getting into it enough. Because if you start getting too used to the words in your own head, your body initially will start to accept it. But then if you try and tell yourself that something is so, and your body automatically knows that that is not the case, it can just reject what you are trying to tell it. Or to the mind, so on and so forth. Yeah. So I find it's better to not have just one crucial way of getting into that state, because if it comes to that one day that you need to get something done and that is just not working, welcome to burnout.
Yeah, okay. And what is maybe one way of getting into that state for you?
For me, I find this is going to sound strange, but I find learning or re-examining what I have done before tends to get me into that really receptive state.
Okay.
Where I'm willing to challenge what I already know and to reevaluate what I perhaps wasn't so strong at. And getting that sensation into me feels like I'm, for lack of a better word, tinkering with something, like figuring out how it all fits together. And that kind of switches on my instinct for troubleshooting.
I see. So for example, you may read an old essay, or you might look at an old piece of art you've done, and sort of that kind of helps you get into the flow state.
Absolutely. And that helps to reevaluate, that helps to remind myself that even though there is that initial trepidation of making something new, that I can see what it will look like or what other pieces have looked like at the end. So I don't feel as scared of like the blank piece of paper or like the blank Word document.
So for those who don't know about the flow state, could you maybe explain what it is and explain what does that mean for writing?
Absolutely. So for those who aren't aware, the flow state is a shorthand or like a sort of offhand term that refers to you essentially being creatively aware and like creatively engaged entirely with what you are doing. Like, so when you refer to someone as being in the zone, like that's another way of saying like in the flow state or vice versa. An athlete would describe it as like them hitting their stride, where like their body is just moving on their own and they are absolutely at the peak of their game. For me, I would say that one of the things that is key in the flow state to me is that I get over the self-doubt of like saying, is this the right thing, to put exactly here? And once I'm in the flow state, that perfectionism tends to take a step back. So there are quite a few studies that have been done on this, like both creatively and in research and development, which is like the idea that you have like a breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in is like the research side of it, where you're taking in all of the possibilities and analyzing what can be done. The development is essentially the editing stage, where you're essentially refining it down to that intended outcome. And writing works pretty much in the same way. You gather, you refine, and you essentially grow the paper at the start, and then you shrink it during editing.
Do you have a favourite piece of writing, which it could be academic, could be otherwise, or has there been a piece of writing that's really, I suppose, attracted you to what you're doing now? Has it kind of influenced you in any way?
That's a good question to ask. The trick with academic writing, and I do apologize to the academic writers that will listen to this, is that there is no genre of writing that probably has a more narrow audience than academic papers, because they are entirely focused on exactly what one person on the planet has done and justifying that work being done. Academic papers, by design, are condensing everything into the most efficient format possible, and it sacrifices a lot of readability to make that happen, which means that even though its focus is to be writing, it actually performs, I would say, arguably the worst of all genres in terms of actually being readable in many cases.
Yeah.
One of the best pieces of writing, and this will be no shock to anyone who is a fan of like fantasy, the best writer that I have come across is the late Sir Terry Pratchett. And the reason why is because everything he wrote has one particular quality, which is it's written like a conversation. Like even if you listen to the audio books of his work, they have the exact same flow as if it was written out, because he wrote everything as if he was speaking it. And I think that direct approach of like approaching it like you are conversing with the reader rather than simply, dictating at them is something that I really want to try and capture in my own like presentation style.
So in a sense, engaging the reader or remembering that you have a reader is
Yes.
important.
Absolutely. And once again, like apologies if this is like a weird like comment in academia, but the actual like job titles can make that difficult sometimes as well.
Yeah.
Like you don't converse with the class, you lecture at them, you profess your expertise at them. It's in a sense, being a lecturer or a professor is kind of a one-sided relationship with the audience, like where the audience is expected to be receptive for their benefit.
Yes.
And although there is a lot of academic debate that goes on, like the actual art of conversation can sometimes be lost in the effort of trying to be heard. And you should strive to be listened to, not just heard. And that requires you to listen in return.
Yeah, and I mean, so much of our education historically and also today is built upon that kind of one-sided conversation, isn't it?
It is. And I think that in my personal experience, all of the best teachers I've had have approached their teaching like a conversation, listened to feedback and thought, okay, how can I help you come to your own understanding of this?
Yeah. So would you say then that someone should approach writing like a conversation and always think about who is reading this?
Yes, absolutely. Like when I write, one of the best pieces of advice I give to myself is that my own writing should be the best resource for myself at a later date.
Right.
Which is that if I was to come back and have nothing but this paper to figure out what I was doing, that should give me all the information I need to be able to go from A to B in a fraction of the time.
I mean, how do you generally feel about writing? Is it something you enjoy?
I really get overexcited about writing, like when it comes to both starting it and refining it. One, because I really want to get my work published, because I really want to engage in that debate myself. But at the same time as that excitement, I always feel that little hint of anxiety, because there is no other opinion on the planet that cannot be challenged. If there's one thing that academics are extremely talented at, it's arguing back. Yeah. And I think that when it comes to me sitting down and writing, I immediately get that initial flash of, am I good enough to write this? Like, have I done enough? Like, have I approached this from every angle possible? The reality is your time is finite, so you can't do absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So I would say I feel a mix of excitement that no one else is doing what I have currently done, but also anxiety that means there's no rule book for me to play with.
And what are you currently doing right now? I haven't asked you.
Yeah. I'm currently researching nuclear science in the engineering department. So I'm looking into the electrochemistry of the nuclear fuel cycle.
Right, okay. And for those who are unfamiliar with nuclear physics, could you explain what that is for?
Absolutely. So the general aim of my research is to try and help to close the nuclear fuel cycle. Okay. And that essentially means that rather than throwing away like spent nuclear fuel once it's done, that we essentially want to try and find a way to recycle all of that spent fuel, because 99% of it is still usable. And what that entails is a lot of very careful like health and safety practice, because these spent fuels are very radioactive, but also has to take into account the very complex chemistry involved there. Like when you put that fuel into a reactor, it will have maybe 2 or 3 elements present. When you take it out, there's at least 57, right. All of which have different properties that you need to account for. So it's a very delicate art of like juggling different problems like one at a time to get to a controlled output that makes energy more efficient and hopefully cheaper.
Did you ever really think that you would be, what are the crossovers between this very scientific subject and writing? Because obviously, compared to some other subjects, I assume, not that I know, you don't write as much as, let's say, English literature or history. So what is the crossovers? What do you have to do, and how does that shape your writing practice?
I would say that in terms of like how does it relate to like writing, like, as an electrochemist or an engineer or a chemist, as opposed to something that's like in English or mathematics, etc. Actually, mathematics is a perfect example of where you're coming to, actually. The technicalities of what are there, so like the technical details of how is this possible, like what is the logical basis like for this method being applicable, like that is absolutely crucial in like any of like the STEM sciences. In particular, engineers are the masters of good methodology. You need to be able to justify in every step, like I am doing this because, and it is suitable for this particular situation because of this, this, and this, despite that. So in terms of like how does it relate to writing, how does my work relate to writing? I would say it is very, very much the core of it, because not only do you have to justify like the methods being used, but because of the very hotly debated history of nuclear energy as a practice, you have to be able to justify both the logical and the moral basis of it as well.
Yeah. That's interesting, I think, because I assume that a lot of people who research nuclear physics, electrochemistry, probably are quite scared of writing. They probably see some subjects that write a lot more and they're a bit terrified of it. So in a way, have you always written when you were younger? Is that something that you feel comfortable with? Or did you always sort of go to perhaps more of the equations? And
I was a mix, but something that I am completely comfortable declaring is that I am autistic. Specifically, I am high-functioning autistic, and I was previously diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. For those who aren't aware on the podcast, there is presently a debate in psychology whether Asperger's syndrome as a diagnosis is accurate or not. Like, that's not something we'll get into at this point, but wanted to raise that if there is anyone who is autistic that would like more information on some of the research that is out there. What this has an impact on for me is how comfortable I felt communicating in different ways when I was younger. I always felt that written communication was more reliable for me because it was difficult for me to get the right pronunciations or the right intonations verbally. It gave me more time to think about what I actually wanted to say and to visually see, like, does this sentence look right? So in a way, I had a lot more practice like writing than I did actually having conversations with people when I was younger. So in that respect, it actually becomes, a lot more naturally to me to write out exactly what I have done than to openly talk about it. Although, fingers crossed, I'm getting better at that.
Is that why you also turned to art to express in a different way? Or?
Yes, that is very much the case. I found that it was difficult for me to describe to people precisely what I wanted to see or precisely what I was seeing. But I found that because I had such a sharp attention to detail, something which is commonly ascribed to people with high functioning autism, it meant that if I was to take a pencil, I could draw exactly what I wanted to see because I would be instantly tell if there was something off.
Would you have any, I suppose, advice or comments to anyone who may also have autism, who's a researcher or a student?
One of the first pieces of advice I would give is that if there is support available, or if there is any option for work support or speaking to someone who is an expert in autism or people who are working with autism, absolutely see if you can take advantage of that and speak to people about it. Because even if you live with the same condition for the rest of your life, as you will do with autism, it is still perfectly possible for you to accidentally misjudge whether part of that is interfering with your ability to communicate with people or is impacting how you are dealing with the world around you. Something that you might notice in children who are autistic, or certainly was the case for myself, is that I used to wear gloves to like high school and secondary school, like even when it was summer. And that had nothing to do with my hands feeling hot or cold. It was because I was so sensitive to stimulus that having my hands gloved essentially kind of muffled the sensations and made it easier for me to handle, one thing at a time. If you need to be in the office and just focus on what you're doing, and you have overhead earphones to help muffle sounds around, like noise cancelling earphones, absolutely feel confident in like doing that. Because at the end of the day, it is not just like your productivity that is like going to be beneficial to someone else. It is your mental well-being. So if there is something that can be there to help you, ask if that can be done or if allowances can be made to try and make it as comfortable for you as possible while still allowing you to do your job or to do the work that you need to do. And there is a lot of support and advice out there if you look for it.
And well, you've mentioned, I suppose, about many things about your writing and how that kind of crosses over with electrochemistry, but also the creative sides of things. Has there been any notable writing experiences or people who've kind of helped you on your academic journey so far?
Yes, I would say that my supervisor, Professor Colin Boxall, has been very, very good at helping me with that. Like, I would say one of the two aspects of Colin that I think mesh very well together for him, like giving good feedback, are that he is an extremely good and very well practiced academic writer and orator. So he is very, very good at giving clear, concise lectures that convey exactly what he wants to an audience. And he's very good at writing academic papers that say exactly what he intends. It also, when it comes to feedback, he is as subtle as a thrown brick through a window. And what that essentially means is that he puts all of the things that he finds that could be a potential hole in a theory or a potential miscommunication up very early and very, very clearly. And initially, I used to see this as, well, am I doing everything wrong to start with? Until I had a quick chat with him and I realized that what he was doing was saying everything that he could see up front very, very early, so that you had the maximum amount of time to actually make all of those edits and then come back to him. I've found that although that is something that can be very intimidating to get like a whole list of things that still need to be changed, at the end of the day, I find that every single time I listen to his feedback, my work has improved, or I have thought deeper about what his feedback is and gone, does this actually make it stronger? Or is it just like that's more like how he would write? So it's always given me more to think about. And he doesn't approach it as I am ordering you to write like this. He approaches it as this is how I feel it could be improved.
And what was that turning point for you when you moved from thinking you've done everything wrong to, I suppose, seeing it as an opportunity for growth?
I feel that one of the times that was when I completed all of the things that he had requested of me, and when he came back to it, it's like even though visually it was only small changes, he basically said that this looked like really damn good as a presentation, and it wasn't long after that I actually won an award for one of the presentations that I gave, and that was essentially concrete proof for me that I had improved to a degree where it wasn't just my supervisor seeing that it was going better, that it was like his peers and my peers that were saying, no, this is praiseworthy.
Yeah. So you kind of got the external validation as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that gave you the confidence in yourself.
Yes, because it's very easy to listen to the voices in your own head too much. Like when you're out of the flow state and you're in that state of editing yourself too harshly.
Yes, yeah. So having that to fall back on when I suppose the critical voices get too loud. Is there anything that really excites you about writing?
The possibility that, like, no matter what you sit down and write, it is almost 100% certain that no human being has written that before. So even if it feels like you are rehashing somebody else's words, or if it feels like you may not have much to say, it is probably still worth saying because it's never come from your mouth before.
And is there sort of a uniqueness in perspective there that you're trying to
Yes, I think that even though we may feel like our voices don't matter sometimes, it is always worth speaking up and asking, or like speaking up and joining the conversation.
through writing in your case? Or,
Yes,
yeah.
like writing or verbally, like I think it's always worth listening and speaking.
And what would you say is the most difficult thing about writing for you?
I think one of the most, and this is going to sound like it's like picking at something everyone already knows, one of the most difficult things to do in writing is to get to the end of the editing process, then get the feedback that then restarts the editing process. Because when you're in the creative like side of it, so like that expansion of breathing in, that's when you're going to feel like the most elated, where like anything is possible, where any of these solutions can work. As you're going into the editing process, you're essentially chopping away at all of the stuff that you did previously. So you essentially naturally become more critical of your own decisions because of all of the blue sky thinking that you did previously. It's hard to not judge yourself in that kind of environment. And when you get to the end of the editing stage and you hear an echoing voice going, oh yes, I think that this could also be different, it can be very disheartening right up until the point where you start getting that validation back. And you start seeing, no, this looks a lot better than it did previously. So there is a kind of like inverse bell curve to like how much you enjoy the writing process, which is that you enjoy it the most at the beginning and the end. The middle is where the struggle lies.
Yeah, deep in the valley.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the critical voices, because I think that's a really common thing for writers to experience, that they have very critical voices telling them this is awful, no one's going to read this, you're going to get laughed at, why on earth are you even doing this? Do you mentioned the voice, do you listen to that, or do you just try and put them all in a cupboard and shut the door, or how do you deal with that?
I would say that this is a unique perspective for me, like especially when it comes to like not listening to like voices that are like too hypercritical, simply because of my history going through primary, secondary school, and college, because of just how unproportionally heavily I was bullied throughout all of that, and the thing that I will always remember from when I was really small, I think I was about 11 when I first got diagnosed with autism, was some of the psychologists that spoke with me at the time then spoke to my parents. And I learned out after the fact that they had said, no, your child is never going to go to mainstream school. He's never going to hold a steady job. He's never going to get into higher education. And here I am doing a doctorate, a fully funded PhD, like with one of the most celebrated scientists in his field, having held like a steady job, gone to a mainstream school, and essentially proven a lot of people who had very good education to be completely and utterly wrong about a human being that they were told to examine in great detail. My personal attitude to it is listen to the criticism that is there, but remember that all criticism is merely an opinion, including your own. Challenge it, like ask it to produce the results. Like if you're ever like feeling self-doubt about your own self-worth and thinking, I'm here, like shouldn't I be there? Just think, well, how many times have you had to succeed to get this far? Like how many times have you like hit the wall and then kept going? Like we just notice more of our failures because we're programmed to do that as a survival instinct. It's important to celebrate the successes as well.
And it's important to note that you got back up again, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to like getting in that darker place, I have a lot of experience of climbing back out of that particular hole. So I do just I challenge the thoughts in my head like directly to just go, okay, you think that I am not good enough to do this. What is the evidence to support that?
Yeah.
And eventually, like my mind starts drawing blanks.
So we have some common writing problems that students might experience. And so I'm just going to ask you for your words of wisdom on these problems. So the first one is, where do I begin? I'm completely overwhelmed. I don't even know how to get my first words down. How would you get started on an essay that you feel completely overwhelmed with? And do you have any advice for those who might experience this?
First of all, like that is not uncommon at all, like especially if you're facing like a blank page. A blank page is the scariest thing in the world to look at because it's the one time that there will be no mistakes there or like not anything for someone to argue back against. And that is why a lot of people just like have the trepidation to not even engage with it. I would say if you're doing something like an essay and there is, and it's using the IMRAD structure. So for those who are unfamiliar, that stands for Introduction, Methods, Results and Discussion, referring to the different parts of like most academic writing, be it books or articles, etc. Start with the stuff that you know absolutely concretely, or the things that you know for a fact that you yourself did. So in a paper, this would be like the methods section is where I tend to start, because I know that there is no one else on the planet that is more of an expert on what I personally have done than me. If you know that there are parts that absolutely have to go in, or if you know that there are certain parts that need to be touched on, as you're going through the essay, you can write down a little roadmap that says it has to consider this, it has to consider that. If you're going through a particularly long essay, one of the things to write down for yourself, like whether it's a presentation or a written piece, is to just remind yourself to like have a good story going through it. Now that might sound like contrary to like writing a good scientific piece. I was doing a presentation recently where I was really struggling to make everything connect, even though all the information was there. The second that my supervisor said, "What's the narrative of this?" I went back, reworked it, and in less than 2 hours, it went from being a jumbled mess to probably my best presentation so far.
Okay, and so when you say a story, is that something that you mean you want to communicate with your audience?
Yes, like what do you want to communicate like to the reader? Like essentially, the job of an author is to introduce them to like a new topic they haven't encountered before, and to make them care enough about it to learn more.
And so, can you tell me a story about your research that would make me want to learn more, considering I actually know nothing about nuclear physics or electrochemistry?
Yeah. I would say in terms of like just how quickly like the science in this field has progressed previously, I can tell you that in 1995, there was the construction of a particular reactor in Scotland called the Dounreay Fast Reactor Project. This reactor was decades ahead of its time. And in terms of like the advanced technology that was actually employed, right now we don't have another like fast breeder reactor in the UK. But we had an operating one before most people in the UK had even heard of Queen or AC/DC.
Right.
Like we essentially sped past like almost every other nation on the planet to have a reactor that could produce the same fuel that it was burning and produce more than it was burned. That may sound like an alchemist's dream, but this was something that was proven effective technology that we could make use of. We already have the capacity to make things that sound impossible happen. We just need to keep pushing forwards and do it responsibly. Not many people know that we had a 250 megawatt reactor with a core the size of a dustbin.
Wow. Yeah.
That was literally like 90 centimeters high.
Yeah. Showing that is, I think, showing why your research is relevant to people's lives or how it could be relevant and making it accessible, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's not just about the idea of, oh, we're going to keep the lights on, even though that is something we absolutely want to be able to do. It's a case of, well, there's already so many other things that we could get back that like we don't have other good sources for, like medical isotopes for people's chemotherapy or like other like medical procedures. We can get those through like closing the fuel cycle. We can also get radioactive sources that people need for testing Geiger counters and keeping people safe on radioactive sites. Things like helium and other like isotopes of hydrogen we can also get by being responsible with the resources we've got. If we recycle everything else, why not do that with our own energy?
All right, we have another problem, which is quite common. How would you write an introduction?
Good question. And this is going to sound like I'm dodging it a little bit, but I would say that how would you write the introduction? You write it last. And the reason why is that you have to answer 4 main points with an introduction, which is what is the problem that is attempting to be solved? What previous studies have been done in this particular field? Why is there a research gap there for this research to be done? And why should the reader care about this particular study? If you can answer all 4 of those questions within the introduction section, then I would say that it has done very well. The trick with that is that you have to be able to balance, like telling the story of what has happened before and slowly narrowing it down towards what your study is particularly doing, almost always finishing off with a quick introduction of, and here's the rest of the paper. The other thing as well is that introductions tend to be one of the most common places in a paper or in a book that can get bloated. It's not uncommon for people to split up an introduction section into introduction and theoretical basis to try and make it very, very clear. Now, here's where the introduction stops. Here's the rest of the stuff you need to understand the rest of this paper. But I would say that I know that the methodology section is one of the points where like most papers tend to get thrown out. If their methods section doesn't allow the paper to be repeatable, then that's almost always where it's going to get thrown back out. The results section is literally what everyone came to see. So that has to go in there, and it has to have enough in there to make a convincing case. The introduction's purpose is to make the reader care about the rest of what comes after it, and to provide a solid introduction so that the rest of it doesn't sound like jargon.
So going back to that story idea you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Like if you think of it as a story, it makes a lot more sense because in Act 1, you introduce the characters. In Act 2, the characters encounter the villain. In Act 3, you get the happily ever after.
And another thing, I suppose that maybe relates more to your field is how would you make your writing clear and succinct? I mean, I think it's important for all scientific writing, but I'm aware that potentially in engineering it can be much more succinct. So would you have any advice for those who are worried about that?
I would say that it is significantly harder to write concisely than it is to write extravagantly, because you can always find more ways to describe something. But when you have a limited space to put those words in, all of a sudden you have to say, well, okay, is this exactly what I need to say? But is it also short enough? I would say that the old quote that constantly comes up is Albert Einstein's, which is if you can't explain a subject succinctly, you don't understand it well enough. I find that actually holds true to a certain degree, which is that the more you understand something, the easier it becomes to explain it simply to an audience, because you can then go, okay, I know what this is like, therefore I'm going to explain it to someone else. So, for example, a lot of people that I encountered during outreach didn't know how our old nuclear reactors, actually made electricity. Up until the point where I described it as well, what you essentially do is you use the thermal energy given off by the nuclear reaction to essentially boil water the same that you would in a giant kettle, and that turns around a steam turbine the same way that you would a windmill, and that's what produces the energy at the end of it. So although that is a massive contraction of what is actually going on in there, I would say that a lot of the people who are listening would get the idea of, oh yeah, it heats up the water, which turns the fan, which makes electricity. And that demonstrates an understanding that everyone can attach to.
Yeah. In a sense, then, if you find that you're writing quite extravagantly, maybe reassess, do I actually understand what message I'm trying to get across now?
Yes, which is why narrative is so important. Like, the simpler the message, the more powerful it is.
But someone who thinks that they are not very good at academic writing and thinks they should be much better than they are, and they kind of beat themselves up for it, what would you advise?
My advice is don't feel that you are alone in that. I think everyone hates their own writing even before they've finished it. I would say one of the things that I like to do to double check that is like my earlier statement of treating my own writing as a good resource to myself, which is that once I'm done with it, I go back, read through it, and treat it as if it is a resource that I have written for myself to understand my own work. And if I find that there is a disconnect there, that's when I can tell that there is something that probably needs to change. And treating it that way, as in like, no, if you are literally writing it to yourself as if you didn't like know everything, but you had to repeat it later, that can be a little bit of a trap sometimes, because you don't want to write it too hyper specifically for yourself because you are the expert in what you have done. So if possible, it's always good to get a second pair of eyes on. But I find that treating it as like a helpful guide to yourself, to your own work, means that even if like it doesn't get published, it's still a great resource for yourself to find out what on earth you were doing.
Yeah, especially a year later when you look back and think,
Absolutely.
what on earth was I on about?
Yes.
Great. And then possibly a bit more of a boring question, but probably one that's very common, is how would you structure a dissertation? It kind of goes back to feeling overwhelmed, but you've got this huge piece of work in front of you. How would you start?
I would start by making sure that I allocate enough like time to planning it out. So like getting over that like blank canvas syndrome by reminding myself of like the steps that I need to take to get to the end of it. I always start writing from the methods section, as I said earlier, because I know that that is the part that is going to be like most scrutinized, like by engineers. It's also the point where like all of the rest of the paper, like discussing the results and actually seeing whether the techniques that we used are applicable in this case, is entirely resting on the methods section. So that is the point which is like the balance of the seesaw. I know for a fact that it is very easy to get sucked into writing the introduction first. So I always try and either skip to the results that I know I'm going to be building a lot of the discussion around, or to doing the methods section first, because that is something that I can start writing even if I don't have all of the results yet. And it's one of the parts where it's easier to be limited because you know that you just have to limit it to what you have done and to be very hyper specific. And because the methods section also tends to be quite small, it means that you get one of the most important tasks and arguably one of the most difficult tasks out of the way first.
And you have something down
Exactly.
on the paper.
Yeah. Exactly. But to answer the question of how to like write a dissertation, I would say plan early. Like start with the bits that you know are concrete and treat them as like cornerstones, and then make sure that you build the rest of like that dissertation around the points that you have identified are crucial to it.
So those are all our problems, but I'm just going to read out a small quote from an author called Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way. And she writes, "Progress, not perfection, is what we should be asking of ourselves." And so I do think that that fits in nicely with what we've been talking about today. And I'd like to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. This podcast has been produced with Lancaster University's Learning Development Team, which are based at Lancaster University Library. With special thanks to Dr. Louise Innes and Dr. Beth Caldwell for their support for this podcast. I'd also like to thank the other scientific writing mentors who have supported this podcast. The Scientific Writing Centre is a place where any undergraduate student from the Faculty of Science and Technology or the Faculty of Health and Medicine can discuss their scientific writing with a trained postgraduate scientific writing mentor. The Scientific Writing Centre is not a class or a course, it's a one-to-one appointment, which takes place on campus in C130 in the library. Appointments can last up to 45 minutes. To find out more, please go to www.lancaster.ac.uk/library/learn.